There is no profit in despair, never has been. Pointless looking for it in the first place, unless desperate hope is all you've got. Okay, so the world's going to come to a sudden end, but at the very least try to think of it as a test of character. I think it's true that you can come to terms with even the most extreme of situations if you're forced to stay at that point for long enough. Accept it and set your own terms and expectations of how you're going to face your demise without anyone holding your hand and weeping over you. And let's be honest, it can also break people. I know, because I've seen it. Once again, here, my indifference seems to be my shield. As you do in such circumstances, the mind wanders far and wide if you're lucky. Better that way than the tight self-confusion of panic and mental self-immolation. It doesn't matter what you do, you'll end up back at the same point. A lot of people can't handle it. And it's an addictive state as well. You pick up panic from others, and too bloody often you can reciprocate. You really got to watch the company you're keeping. You can drive yourself mad, literally mad in your despair. And as I say, it always brings you back to the same place, here and now, nowhere else. And looking up at the great big red hole in the sky that's staring down at you with malign indifference to your state of mind. I'd seen such people who've taken a dive over the psychotic cliff top and were now wandering around in a delusional and hallucinatory state. They weren't here as well as not being all there. I suppose I had to be pleased that at least they had a smile on their faces. I wonder what they were seeing. Oh well, that's them sorted, I suppose. I kept getting the strangest of thoughts. Even for someone as dim as me, never the smartest person in any room I'd ever occupied, my mind hated the vacuum that I refused to fill with despair. Really weird stuff kept popping up. For instance, purgatory must have its own unique physics, I thought. I'm not in purgatory, by the way. Not that it mattered anymore, I suppose. Nothing really mattered anymore. In my recent dreams, none of this was happening to me because I had, in my dreams again, long ago left the country and gone to live in an apartment in Toulouse, near the Jean Jaurès metro station and overlooking the noisy carousel in the square below. Yeah, in my dreams. That was a specific dream a while back when dreams sort of were attainable if you had the resources. So now I would never be able to stand in my Toulouse window with a cup of tea in my hand on a Saturday afternoon and watch the protesters try to take on the French police in their dark stormtrooper uniforms. It might have been entertaining. My money's always on the French cops though. The more specific your dreams, then you're just lining yourself up for failure and disappointment. But if you place the potential of outcomes a great distance away, then you have to accept willingly and happily that you will always be a hostage to fortune until you relax into that place and pick up its rhythms and its flavours. In theory, anyway. It's a theory in development, not a very good one because it can never happen, like any plan in the short, medium or long term these days. It's all over. Nobody's dreams for some tomorrow will ever happen, ever be realised. There will be no tomorrow after the next tomorrow. The sun might rise and shine on some forsaken spot in the solar system, but here it would never shine on anything living. That's what the scientists and politicians have been telling us for the past few days anyway. I wish I was smart enough to be able to challenge them and their news of an imminent cataclysm that they seem barely able to describe, let alone explain. Everyone anywhere just looked up into the sky and it was pretty bloody obvious there would be no point in ordering anything online to arrive in 2 days' time. Billions and billions of life will remain forever unlived. It's too late to hope for anything other than the swift and painless demise, and heaven only knows how many countless millions of people have already taken matters into their own hands. They decided that they would depart this life on their own terms and not that at the whim of some cosmic apparition they didn't even understand. I suppose that even the end of worlders must be so happy to be proved right, even if for reasons different to the ones they've always been spouting, and yet, despite that confirmation of their beliefs. But it was all futile now. There was absolutely no hope of anything beyond tomorrow. I looked up at the sky and the growing monster up there. My arrangements have been simple. I just asked my mum to be ready to put the kettle on and my dad to get ready to catch me. Beyond that, I'd made no arrangements. Something else had taken charge with dismissive contempt that my needs and those of others were not even a factor in any calculation. I generally pay very little attention to the news because I have a simple philosophy that has evolved over the last 15 years, that I should not worry or regard the news because I have absolutely no influence whatsoever over any of it. Compared to many people I know, I was in a happier place in my general despondency than any of them, because I had chosen over the years to not be an expert in the minutiae of what I could never control. I might even be cheeky and say that I was smarter than any conspiracist for simply knowing less than them. Information is power, they might have told me, but there was absolutely no power in information that was to hand today. During my briefest recent sojourns into the news media, I heard that there was havoc everywhere else, and I mean absolute bloody havoc, fighting, drinking, drugs, killing, wailing, gnashing of teeth, you name it. But not here. Oh, there was trouble, but it was far more subdued and well directed towards people in the locality who regarded it as a favourable windfall event to release their true colours. They had fantasies they wished to live out finally, but fantasies can never be realised. For instance, I would love to have the 25-year-old Jane Fonda as my girlfriend, but one of us is 60 years too late on that one. We're just a small community in the middle of the island, and I think that despite being as colourful as anywhere else in the world, in a minor sense, there is a basic decency in the heart of most people. I will, however, observe that some people, troublemakers, are conspicuous by their absence these days. The whisper is that a number of people have had their hoped-for Saturnalia and nefarious ambitions subdued. But there were some secret bad bastards out there that had to be controlled. For us collectively, it meant that the end of the world would still be a noisy and raucous affair, but we were going to be as dignified as we could muster in our worst fears. It was a time of character to rise to the surface, and it did so in so many countless ways of kindness and support. If you knew some of these people, whom I call friends, from a long way out, and stereotyped them as exemplifying the worst components of society, then you'd be so surprised. They weren't hypocrites like many of those who had regularly judged them. I went to school with most of them, and I was never sure if I was being tolerated because I was entertaining, or that beating me up would have been embarrassing. And as we got older, we sort of all spoke the same language of becoming adults in the end, but had not given up a visceral need to have outrageous fun. They looked dangerous. They were dangerous, I suppose, but I knew them. They never backed down from a rumble, as the odd facial scar worn with pride and the odd missing tooth showed. But they did the wrinkly runs to raise money for local care homes for the elderly, and they would dress up like a host of satanic Santas at Christmas and take presents to the frail and elderly. The old ladies loved the smelly, oily bakers, and the older men would find them easy and eager listeners about the bikes they'd ridden in the 1950s and early 60s. By now we had a brand new population. It was both frightening and motivating. My friends were always up for fun, and occasionally I'd still join up with them, riding pillion to bike rallies and biker music festivals. Two good things and one bad thing about them. They never drank like idiots or took drugs like idiots, but they sure as hell danced like idiots, and the world watched them in delight. Anyway, and this is the surprising item in all that was going on, indirectly I'd learned or surmised that purgatory was full. Not only full, but would soon be closing down permanently, which was at odds with the already papally dismissed limbo of the Catholics. The unsaid of the past was now very much a matter of the present. And for many among the living, it was going to be an absolute pain in the ass, me among them. I am not talking about such simple yet meaningful things like words of love unspoken. Nothing as sad and depressing as that. But let me take it a bit further back. Let's talk about electrons. Maybe I should talk in terms of quantum entanglement from the idiot's point of view. Electron pairs with each of the components of the pair a long way apart, yet in some form inexplicable to me, could communicate faster than light with each other. He created it, but it did drive Einstein bonkers because nothing could move faster than the speed of light, especially if one of the pair of electrons was here and the other one somewhere in Proxima Centauri. Don't expect a detailed explanation, I only just about passed my exams in physics at school, so I'm going to be painting a picture for you with wax crayons and not advanced mathematics. It was a few years ago that I started thinking about what happened to the emails that we wrote and we never sent. Text typed and then either deleted, not sent, which meant they'd be in draft somewhere. In other words, if we create a message using electrons, even if we don't send them, then it exists. But we had done a physical act on the keyboard, so then I rationalised with a glass of wine in hand that electrons must have been involved and were now probably in a purgatory of their own and lost for purpose and direction. So maybe even those words we typed and then erased had an identity that was never realised with a specific purpose. Somewhere in that purgatory, full of inappropriately directed or unsent electrons, the words like bastard still prevail. Those messages speaking of truth are always without the exclamation mark that is always reserved for angry people or daft conspiracists who tend to write in capitals and triple underline in green and red. And I think it was Ernest Hemingway, who wrote that the more he edited the text he wrote, the clearer the message became. It just struck me that what had once been typed must still exist somewhere, and I now realise that many unsent texts had always been looking to realise their original purpose. I'll leave that one there for a moment and tell you about the imminent end of the world, which does seem germane to my report, I think. They said it was going to be the end of the world. I haven't got a clue how they knew that specifically, but they seemed quite confident about it. I think that was pretty obvious when you looked up in the sky, because these were no space invaders. They again. Always they keep getting the weather wrong, so maybe we shouldn't invest too much in what they are saying. However, now there was what we could probably call bloody obvious physical evidence beyond dispute that they were actually right this time. It seems that when the massive it appeared in our skies, allegedly in the space beyond Mars, which was visible to all of us here, which gives you an idea just how bloody massive it is, the scientists just couldn't fit it into their physics. And I bet the late Professor Richard Feynman would have loved the challenge of defining it. Professor Feynman was never a fan of physicists' self-pronouncement or on something or other if all they provided was a dotted line that said in its intellectual arrogance, if this, then that, then maybe this, then it could be something possibly but probably related to something else. And then they'd expected to be applauded and given a prize for not actually coming up with anything other than satisfying the beliefs of those awarding their grants and the aforementioned prizes. Dear Lord, you can hide one hell of a lot in the mathematics of dotted lines in Einstein's equations, and not even Einstein trusted all his own equations, like I already told you. Check out in quantum entanglements, like I said, Niels Bohr believed in Einstein's theoretical discovery, even though Einstein didn't. Niels Bohr's view and confidence in Einstein's equations eventually prevailed, but sadly both these great men were long dead by then, and it would probably have been embarrassing for the great man who had spent so much time disputing his own correct equations and assumptions. But neither of these men were populists. They weren't looking for headlines. They were just good old-fashioned physicists who tried to find an equation that fitted the real world in all its eccentricities. Well, it didn't seem that this new modern breed were up to the degree of integrity, and yet they came up with the same conclusions and pronouncements that said everything would all come to a juddering halt tomorrow. In our skies, there was what appeared to be a massive red eye. I think this buggered up the general physics because it portrayed many of the characteristics of what was thought to be a black hole, with time and space tumbling into it. But it was as red and ugly looking as a ragged, angry, rheumy eye. A red black hole. Like I said, it bucketed up everything and introduced new fucked up physics for everyone. We'd never know what it really was because there was no time to apply for a grant. It, the red thing, clearly had its own agenda. It just appeared in our skies one day. One moment it wasn't there, the next there it was. An entity so ridiculously huge that even though it was way past Mars, it could be seen with the naked eye even in daylight. This was one seriously fucked up physics for you, not only questioning space and time, but also our reality. Some said it was God's eye bearing judgments down on the human race and any innocent creature unfortunate enough to have evolved on the planet. None of them, or us for that matter, was going to evolve much beyond tomorrow anyway. Everyone else seemed to be so invested in panic that no one asked how the hell such a thing could exist in near space at the scale without destroying us already, tearing us apart and sucking us into that dark and cruel heart. It just made no sense, even to someone as dull as me, and yet, like the weather people, they had made a very confident prediction, even though they hadn't proven it to us. But we were so used to being fed opinions rather than news that we accepted it quite simply because we couldn't dispute the evidence of our own eyes. Sat here in the dingle, the lovely narrow woodland local to the small town near which I lived on a small island called Anglesey off the northwest coast of Wales, I could see it clearly. Let's say that it occupied about 1/10 of the sky as viewed from the wooden bench on which I was sat. I could see it because we have a big-assed sky up here. If that thing was beyond Mars, as they said, and still filled up 1/10 of the sky, then it was impossibly big, had to be. And if it really was that big, then it would have consumed Mars, Saturn, Uranus, and nibbled on the Kuiper Belt as an insulting little hors d'oeuvre. How could it occupy that much space and not tear that place apart? I knew enough about gravity, as I knew enough about black holes, vaguely that is. I knew enough to know that if it was proved to be a black hole, albeit a bloody strange one, then eventually, given enough time, which we don't have, it would probably consume an entire galaxy, or at the very least do a fair bit of damage to it. And there it was, allegedly, only a mere billion miles away. Maybe someone hadn't told it yet that it couldn't possibly exist, yet the bloody red thing would just hang there, visible in both day and night, and it was clearly expanding. The very scale of it was way too big to fit into my imagination. I took the stoic approach. I couldn't control or influence this event or its outcome, so I chose to disregard it as much as I could. In such circumstances, what's the best thing to do? Run around screaming and wet yourself, or affect a bit of dignity by ignoring the bloody thing? In other words, I hadn't watched the telly, listened to the radio, or any podcasts on the matter. Mind you, I was tempted to check the tarot card readers and astrologers for their point of view, but in general, I think the advice would be no free beer tomorrow. Anyway, as far as I was concerned, it all made life a bit easier for some of us. There was no need to strive for anything now. Everyone was so busy panicking together, and yet we would all die alone. I considered those people close to me who had already gone ahead, as it were. I knew for certain that their passing was as individual an experience that they could never share with anyone else. I just hoped I could muster a bit of dignity right at the very end. It would be an invisible gesture in a global sense, but at least it would be mine, an indication of agency and self-control at the very end. Like everyone else, I've been watching and developing my own ongoing theories, looking to make sense of what I was perceiving as a definite non-scientist. Finally, I decided that the big red impossible thing in the sky was only possible if it existed in the spaces between the atoms, molecules and other crap that's in our near vacuum. It exists in between at the same time. So based on my Reader's Digest level of science, the reason it hadn't destroyed us already is because it wasn't all there really, or entirely. Its power must be partially diluted by being here, but not being all there. A bit like me, really. I just realised even electrons would probably be destroyed in a black hole, surely. It could also be a filter, a window to somewhere. My theory of elsewhere. Maybe someone somewhere else was also panicking, and their own scientists were coming up with similar kind of bollocks. Intelligence and common sense are rarely married, I found. Especially if opinion is involved. Never mind. Anyway, I suppose it was good news for the angry among us. You'd be surprised how many angry people there are, a hell of a lot. Trouble democracy's in proves that many times over. Angry and dim, might I add. So there they were, vindicated, because they could point in a southwesterly direction and blame all their failings and lack of achievement on that thing, when they were just about to do something about it. Spare the effort they were. I'd done my bit and profited very little from it. So my message to any aliens out there planning my downfall, really, you shouldn't have gone to so much effort. I was happy with the mental equilibrium I was achieving at the end of my life. I was hoping I was demonstrating the same kind of dignity that my father had at the end of his life. If I could get anywhere near that, then I'd be happy. Well, maybe not happy. Everyone I'd ever loved was now dead, so work out the rest. My remaining best friend had gone away 2 days ago to be with her mother, but that last night each of us decided to spend time loving the one we were with. Next morning she was gone before I woke up. No note. What was there to say that could be written in just a few lines? And I hoped the dying part would be quick and I wouldn't be stretched to infinity, which sounded a horrible way to die in any black hole. A red one in our case. Red, maybe it was space-time being ironic, I don't know. But of course, like everything else that had been going on over the past few decades, someone just had to turn up and bugger up my essential personal feng shui at the end. Bastard. Actually, bastard electrons as well in my case. It calls for another theory based on subjective analysis. What the hell does that even mean? I'd come to the dingle, a lovely wooded valley between the town and the reservoir, a narrow valley, a beautiful place full of varied trees and dappled shade and echoing birdsong and the sound of the river tumbling through and over rocks and stuff. Everything that made your soul just stop, listen, and simply be elsewhere. I like the theory of being elsewhere, new and unattached reference points, no context to them, tying back to all too familiar humans I wish had disappeared before I even knew them. So I'd wanted to be alone here at twilight. I had nowhere else to go, and I was managing my little solitude quite nicely until the fat pig came and sat down next to me. I'm very sanguine and difficult to surprise these days, have been for a very long time. It takes the aggression away from people trying to be aggressive, I found. I don't give anyone a platform to perform their evil. But seeing as this bastard had been dead for the past 6 years, or was it 8, it was a bit of a surprise. I didn't go to his funeral, but was tempted to turn up with a spade and a can of petrol to make sure the world was rid of this little bastard. I thought I'd seen him earlier moving from the cover of one tree to the next, but of course I persuaded myself that was ridiculous. And if it were a ghost, then what the hell did I have to worry about? I did take a second to wonder whether I was manifesting the pig for some obscure, deeply seated psychological need. Oof. I could smell the corruption, recognising it immediately. Maybe hell is full, I thought, and Satan had just chucked him out. He didn't look like a zombie, at least. Then I had a religious, philosophical thought. I know the Pope, the last one I think, or was it the one before, the Polish Pope, who had told the faithful that limbo no longer existed. But just maybe purgatory did for the rest of us non-Catholic types. Although I couldn't really tell you the difference between them both and why one had been dismissed and the other apparently still existed, allegedly. So I amused myself by musing on what that meant. I prefer to believe that if ghosts exist, then they are generally manifested during twilight, that time where we can convince ourselves that shadows move. I think it's them anyway, trying to make a statement, or maybe it's a state of confusion before they eventually dissolve into the shadows themselves. But I hadn't seen him before. He'd been dead for years, so why has he turned up now? I knew him to be an abject coward, most bullies are after all, and knew that he was always incapable of making decisions because of that cowardice. Hence, in my quick thinking phase, I decided that he was scared of something. But what would the dead be scared of? They're already dead. The big red eye in the sky wasn't going to damage him, was it? I think most religions seem to believe either in judgment or karma or something like that. He was a coward. He'd avoided it. Brings me back to my theory about purgatory. It's a daft idea. Was he scared of the beyond? What the hell did he want from me? One thing, I wasn't going to be his buddy at this late stage. Anyway, he was a ghost. What the hell did he have to worry about? How the hell did any of this affect a ghost? I looked up. There was the great beyond we were all about to tumble into. Tomorrow, apparently. He was dead, and he just sat down next to me. How bloody inconvenient was that? And there seemed to be a few others out there pretending to be shadows as well. What the hell? "I can see you," I shouted. "Piss off." Back to the one sat next to me. I always guessed he had a massive sense of inadequacy disguised as pathological narcissism. You don't need to look that up. Save time for yourself. It's a person who's convinced of his greatness despite obvious shortcomings. A control freak because of cowardice. Control what you can because uncertainty scares you and challenges your ability to control your world. Yes, of course it's more complicated than that, but you've probably come across this kind. He was about 5'4", flabby, fat, pale, and wearing a black suit worn grimy and threadbare by time, the jacket hanging below his ass somewhere, as elegant and as cheap as ever. I suppose that handsome is as handsome does in the end. The thing with some narcissists is that they cannot see that you can see them. I mean, they're far cleverer than you and I, aren't they? Well, they believe that. This one, he had a pile of papers sticking out of his inside jacket pocket, and there seemed to be some text on the ones I could see. I really wanted to be left alone to contemplate the beautiful nature I could see around me that will be gone sometime tomorrow, and above all wanting to be left alone. Suddenly time was far more precious than ever, and I didn't want to give this bastard any of mine, even though I know he would try and steal anything anyone had. I could smell his fear, and his decay as well, which I found reassuring in a spiteful way, but the latter could have been his aftershave or halitosis for all I know. I couldn't bring myself to look at him any further. He shuffled where he was, which surprised me a bit because this guy had been an appallingly arrogant bully, never stepping away from the opportunity to intimidate, no matter how casual the moment, or even if he had to contrive a false reason to do it. He tried it on me once again. Arrogance of a diminutive person. "I took care of you," he said, hoping to push the guilt button. "Really?" Next he would be trying to induce an emotional response. I turned and looked at him. God, he needed a wash. There was always a lingering question of hygiene about him. You never accepted anything from his hand. "Why were you so ungrateful?" he said. Checked his eyes and the blink rate. The blink rate of a person can be quite revealing, possibly even among the dead. Let's see. He was demonstrating the slow blink rate of someone searching for a weakness to attack. You reveal any weakness to these pigs and their blink rate slows down even further. It's a useful bit of knowledge to have. The earlier on in your career you discover it, the better. The blink rate slows down even more as they focus in on what they reckon they can use against you. "I heard you were dead," I said. "Evidently not dead enough. What do you want?" "I'm trying to get some peace and quiet here. Enjoy the view. End of the world and all that." I pointed at the big red thing in the sky. I was intrigued when his eyes failed to direct themselves at what I was pointing. "That thing," I repeated. "You know, the end of everything, the thing you refuse to look at. But you're dead, so why the hell does it matter to you?" Clearly it did matter, because he continued to refuse to look at the sky. I'm not a person given to seeking revenge, but I do believe in the hope for retribution of karma somewhere down the line. But I didn't have more time to wait. He stared at his feet again, well-worn and dusty pair of black office shoes. "Haven't you been judged or something yet? Well, why are you here and not wherever you're supposed to be? Hopefully down there. Define whatever," I said to myself as a personal sidebar. It doesn't work like that," he said. My theory's holding up, maybe, because you choose not to. I thought about it. So you choose not to engage with the program, fear of judgment. Must be a terrible thing for a narcissist to be judged, because they've never ever done anything wrong, have they? It was always other people, always their fault, and to be judged for the errors of others, inconceivable. But if you weren't a very good narcissist and just plain mean, then you'd eventually work out it was your fault, all right? Surely. "There's a church in the north of the island," I said. "Very isolated, lonely place, cold and grey, and with poor farming land all around it. But clearly someone in that area had a bit more money than the rest, and maybe a bit of a reason to be scared of what was coming up for him." He looked up slyly at me. He said, "And the thought of what's happening doesn't scare you?" I ignored the interruption. I'd made my peace. I just wanted to rattle him. "Anyway," I continued, There are a few large gravestones there, 3 I think. And they're really interesting because if you read the engraved writing, which takes up most of the large stones, it's an essay contrived by someone to persuade whomsoever that the person interred was such a good man, and that it was dressed up as a list of holy attributes. To me, it had always stank of the guilty trying to justify themselves even after they were dead. And they always reminded me of you. If you'd also taken the time to read the other, more modest gravestones in that lonely, sad place, you'd find that most of the women in the area are called Jane. And not 1 or 2, but at least 10 in a small, isolated graveyard. That is strange. "What's the matter with you?" he asked angrily. "You're going to die," he shouted at me. "I've surrendered myself to the programme," I said. "Control what you can and abandon yourself to the rest and hopefully good fortune." "Look at it," he said, without looking at it himself, obviously. "I haven't stopped looking at it," I said, "since it turned up. Lots of people can't, though. Not surprising, really, if it's their day of judgment, is it? I only hope to God it's not the day of rapture. Bloody hell, I've always found those right-wing extreme evangelical types irritating and so bloody smug. I don't want to see any of these bastards prove right in any bloody way. Maybe I'll get a petition on the other side to get rid of them for their self-indulgent tolerance and needing to have someone to feel superior to, just to feel smug about themselves. Creeps." Oh God, I thought, I've gone off on a rant again. I hate them. Anyone whose platform is built on contempt of others deserves it, though. I looked at him. He looked taken aback. Oh God, clearly I said that last bit aloud. "I'm more of a fan for the home for the perpetually groovy myself," I said. He told me not to be bloody stupid. "Your end is up there," he said, pointing again without looking. "So's yours, apparently," I said. "And you're the one dead, and you're the one who's scared. Curious that. What are those papers you've stuffed in your pocket?" He looked puzzled for a moment and nearly looked up at the sky. His eyes were busy calculating an approach to employ on me. "That's the stuff you sent me," he said. "I sent you? What stuff?" I was puzzled. I haven't seen this bugger for years, even though before he died. "When the hell did I last send you an email?" "I haven't sent you anything for more than 10 years. He grabbed and pulled all the printed emails from his coat pocket. "Much longer than 8 to 10 years. Goes back 15 years further." "Really? And you've still got emails I sent you 15 years ago?" "You didn't send them." "So how you got them?" "You didn't send them, but you wrote them." Okay, I thought. Over the years, there must be hundreds and hundreds of emails I must have written but didn't send for some reason or other. The matter had been resolved, or the matter wasn't worth pursuing, possibly. Let me see. I took the preferred bunch of paper. I was still worried about hygiene with this bastard, even though he was dead, technically speaking anyway. "Where have you been since you've been dead? I thought you'd be in charge of it by now, you and your leadership qualities and all that." "I wouldn't ordinarily have cared, but you know, needs must. It might be germane to my own next step, although hopefully not going where I hoped he'd been. I couldn't smell sulphur on him, though. I never liked him, so it wasn't inappropriately rude to inquire on this kind of stuff. He was an appalling monster when he was alive, and I didn't expect him to be any different here and now in his most recent post-dead state. But he was obviously subdued and distracted by something if he dragged himself to me in the hope of gaining some kind of advantage. I won't put any money on him winning any favours from me. If I remembered quite correctly, the last time we'd been together, I was all seconds away from throwing the cruel little bastard out the window for offending an innocent person. He pondered my last question a while, then said, "I don't really know where I've been. I think I've been in a waiting room somewhere. Lots of people passing through, but I didn't go with them." He searched around for solid memories, but couldn't find any. Probably like looking for good deeds somewhere in his past, I suppose. "Waiting room," he said. "Have you been spending all this time in a train station, airport? What?" Sort of made sense in a traditional travelling towards the light kind of way. Train station, I think, Victorian, felt like that. Over-engineered kind of place, elegant but practical, but I don't know what it was for other people. And he'd been waiting there for years? Oh, bugger, I didn't like the sound of that. I just hope to be transported straight to my mum and dad, or just never wake up again and not be conscious of not being conscious. No awareness at all was far better than being stuck in a train station waiting room for God knows how long. Time passed, he said. Anyway, it was better than I wasn't ready for the next bit. Why? 10 years in a train station had done little to improve his nasty demeanour. It was still there, right, indifference to the fore. I'm not the one dead here, so that must at least give me some kind of advantage over him. Advantage? What the hell was I on about? I just didn't care. I wanted him gone. The last thing I wanted was this horrible entity hanging around me for the rest of my days. You haven't been haunting anything in the meantime? I asked. That's enough of that, he backed. Don't be bloody stupid. Interesting. Who's successfully pushing whose buttons here? A bit of a turnout, this. I wanted no power over him. I just wanted him to go away and take his games with him. There we go, I thought. Tell you what, why don't you go and ask somebody else for whatever help you need? Did you see Gary down there by the river drinking a can of reasonably priced lager as usual? The man smiling at the squirrels? Go and ask him for help. He's daft enough. But I wouldn't follow through on any advice he gives you. Daft as a brush, but he's a nice, decent man. I don't suppose you'd recognise when you see it. You go and do that. See if even he'll bother to give you the time of his last day. I'm going for a walk alone. I can't say it's been nice meeting you because it isn't. No, stay, he said. Stay, please stay. Please. It was an end of the tether kind of response, but I wasn't the dead one here, I keep repeating. Aren't you afraid of dying, he asked, belabouring the same point. I shrugged and pointed up at the big red thing in the sky. If I had a choice, then I probably would, but I don't. So what can I do about it? You'll probably go straight through, you will, he said resentfully. Because I haven't been a nasty bastard to everyone I met, you mean? I turned and looked at him face on. I could see right through him, not literally, but 8 years or whatever it had been in a waiting room had taken the edge off his skills of bullying, manipulation, and I could see that. He'd probably been spending the time trying to justify himself and what he'd done. Also, he was trying to push me back into the old relationship, which had never been good for me. I glanced behind us and I could see other individuals, somehow familiar to me, creeping from one tree to another. What are they after? I asked myself. I looked at the scrunched up emails and opened up few to have a look. It was my email address, all right. The one I'd used at work all those years ago before I just up and left the little bastard. The content seemed familiar in the sense that the content reflected the quality of my life and health back then and the obvious need manifest to strike back. Thankfully, I'd taken a breath before sending them, and at the top of the printed page was the word draft. In other words, I hadn't sent them. I knew I hadn't. I checked mine and had a look at a few of the others. One after the other at a quick glance, each carried the same angry messages that reflected just how bad my life had been all those years ago working for this bastard. Not all of them were from me. It appears that other people whose names I recognised immediately had all been going through the same difficulties, and none of us knew that was because he had isolated and threatened each of us in turn. Again, they were all labelled as draft. None of us had sent any of them. So how the hell had he got hold of them then? Have you been keeping these all the time? I asked him and handed them back. No, they just arrived a few hours ago. But I never sent these. Maybe you should have. I didn't know that you felt like this about me, that you hated me. I metaphorically took a step back. You'd have preferred that I'd thrown you through the window? That would have got me in the front page of the Daily Death. Shit, how embarrassing that would have been. He was somebody who was a monster when he was alive, and now dead he was what? So what are you after? Forgiveness. What? You evil little sod, is that what's going on? Are there more of you out there after the same thing? Is that what they're after? I pointed to the few shadows I suppose were moving behind the trees. Probably, he said. You destroyed my life, and now you're dead and scared of getting on the bus to elsewhere. You're looking for forgiveness. Well, you won't get anything of the sort from me, mate. Do you know how much damage and misery you created in so many lives for no other reason than you wanted to and that you could? And now we're all supposed to say it was okay that you kicked vulnerable people in the head when they were alive? I'm going to look for a duck. He grabbed my arm. I need you to forgive me or I'm going to end up somewhere bad. And you reckon we might want to help you? He nodded. I thought about this. I didn't want to be a laughing stock in the next life. If I even ended up somewhere positive and not stretched to infinity by some unexpected bastard red hole. I knew I'd become less of a New Testament kind of guy the older I got. And while not being an eye for an eye character, I was definitely a fan of karma. I sort of brushed his hand away without really touching it. I didn't want to. As you do, so shall it be, mate, I said. I haven't been an angel myself over the years, but I was only doing injury to myself. And if there is a judgment somewhere involved somewhere out there, then there's nothing anyone can do about it. I had nothing else to say, so I walked away and unfortunately he got up to follow me. Go away, I said. Listen, he said, maybe all you have to say is, I forgive you. Why don't you just say that and I'll go away? However you try to dress this up, this is not on me. Dear Lord, I was falling into the narcissist classic call and response here. Just walk away. Don't get caught up in somebody else's crap. I remembered those Nazi war crime trials with men in their 80s, if not older, in the 1980s. At the beginning, I remembered thinking that the appalling things they had done were so far in the past that maybe it didn't matter anymore. Thankfully, I took my thinking a step forward and reminded myself that these people had been guards in extermination camps and had readily taken part in the killing of thousands of people. It had happened and they had done it, and they should be punished. That even when we make no choice, then it's a choice. There is no such thing as simply following orders. There was always a choice, the choice to do nothing or walk away, whatever the consequences. There was moral culpability then, as there was moral culpability in the 80s and in the trials. Throw the bastards in prison and leave them there to rot. No pity, just eventual justice for what they'd done. Before this evil little clown turned up just now, I was indifferent to what was apparently going to be happening tomorrow, although I had no idea what was going to happen. Again, no one had told us, so it must be frightening in that case. I didn't want to be angry. I wanted to be calm and dignified in my last hours. I didn't want to revisit the appalling period in my life. I wasn't being spiteful in denying him the vague semblance of forgiveness for his past cruelties. I was doing the right thing, I told myself. He was contaminating my last day. I turned back and stuffed all the emails back into his jacket pocket. I turned and carried on walking, hoping to see something innocent to bring my stress levels down a bit. I wanted to see a squirrel simply going about its business. What would they be doing now? Humans complicate the simplest of things with over-rationalization. Animals just employ simple, direct instinct. They would know something was going on. They would also know that there was nowhere to go. Squirrels are curious, which suggests intelligence to me, so they might be sat on some branch way up above me thinking about tomorrow or not tomorrow. I realised that I still had my backpack slung over my shoulder and I had some sandwiches in there, just cheese and a gentle piccalilli dressing I'd concocted for myself. I wasn't going to overthink this situation, no matter what anyone tried to do to me. A diminutive figure stepped out from behind a tree, another one of the recently deceased untrustworthy guys. About this one, at least, I'd always been ambivalent, and before he could even raise the unsent email in his hand or open his mouth, I raised my hand and said, whatever it is, you're forgiven. I didn't have a clue what it was. Clearly something behind my back, something among the hundreds of emails I'd written and never sent. It must have been so irrelevant that it had slipped away years ago. Something done behind my back. I didn't care. At least I'd received no emails. You're forgiven, I repeated to him. Oh God, he began to weep and he came towards me with his hand outstretched. I just waved him away. I just want peace and quiet, I said. With that, he just faded away. I heard a howl behind me. It gave me no delight, no pleasure to hear it. It really, really wasn't my problem. No matter how it was dressed up, I no longer wanted to be responsible for anyone else's life. I couldn't give a damn about them. I spun on my heel and headed back along the path towards town. I ignored him and his wailing and leaned into it. He tried to stand in front of me, trying his best to throw guilt at me. I almost ended up walking through him, but I swerved at the last moment and he walked into a tree. I no longer cared. In town, it wasn't quiet. Maybe it was a noisy quiet compared to what was going on elsewhere. And only a handful of people were resorting to fights, to resolve age-old resentment. And they weren't really doing a good job of it. Others were sat on the pavement outside pubs, really drunk. Departed for quite a while, sort of drunk. But they'd wake up and, like I said, they'd be back to where we all were. More beer, maybe. And it was also clear that quite a few had decided to engage in alternate states to see themselves over the finishing line, the one that awaited us all. Everyone had their own monsters to contend with that would still be there, more concentrated and amplified if they did step out of their altered states to think about the broader situation relative to their new, brief future. I knew he was still following me. I wanted to find somewhere to sit down and eat my sandwiches, and it was probably too late to look for a decent cup of coffee. I looked into the pub doorway on the other side of the road. Plenty of drunk people in there. The karaoke machine was on, but I didn't have a clue what the hell they were singing to, because they were all that bad. As for the rest, many were gathered together in raucous conversations and laughter. I heard noise, but I also saw courage in the now. They might as well have their beer and discuss who was the best footballer, George Best or Pele. And like the Nazi camp guards, I shouldn't really point the finger of blame at anyone else for messing up my life. I had to blame myself for accepting it. Countless people must have endured the same kind of crap I had in my life and gone on to do good things in their lives. Anyway, a fight tumbled out of one pub and into the middle of the street, and it was more entertaining than violent. In fact, there wasn't a fight at all because they were all laughing. If there was anyone out shopping today, then it would probably be for chocolates, pork pies, alcohol and cigarettes. No need to worry about terminal illnesses or cholesterol in the tomorrow after tomorrow. I crossed the street and sat down on the bench outside the bank on the corner of the street, one of the few benches that the council had left. I pulled the sandwiches out of my bag and tried to make myself invisible. In the meantime, our hero was occupied on the other side of the road with a few of the drunks and he was pointing at me. I continued to breathe myself invisible and took a munch out of my sandwich. It was good cheese, but maybe I'd put on a bit too much piccalilli. I leaned back and wondered what the patient imminent lottery winners were doing. Apparently there's a tranche of society that is absolutely convinced it's going to win the lottery, and in the meantime, while waiting, all they do is drink tea and wait. They've got their bag full of ideas of how they're going to spend all their lottery win money, and in the meantime they all wait and do nothing with their lives. They're just waiting for someone to give them the go. Well, that's their plan buggered up good and proper, I'd say, and all that precious time wasted doing nothing but drinking tea and eating cheap digestive biscuits. That's good, I thought. At least there's somebody worse off than me in this world. One of the big lads he'd been talking to came over. Leather jackets, denim, oily desert boots. He stood towering over me. "Hi," he said, and sat down next to me. "What you eating?" "Cheese and piccalilli." "Have one," I offered the pack. "Thanks." He took a bite. He pointed up at the sky. "Bastard thing's bigger, you know." "Yeah, I know." "How's Carol?" I asked. "Stopped the chemo." So she and Mum are sat there watching 50s films and chewing painkillers and hitting the sherry. Believe it or not, Mam's happy as Larry, even without the tablets. She had been so upset about living alone after Carol died. Now she doesn't need to bother. I smiled. As long as Mum's happy, I don't care about anything else. By the way, that little bastard over there wants me to threaten to beat you up. Aye, how's that going so far? Not well. Hadn't realised you come armed with nice sandwiches. What's he after? Complicated, I said. You do know he's dead, don't you? Really? He finished chewing and shouted across the street to Stones. Stones was dressed similarly biker, as broad as he was tall, needed a shave, big beer belly, had less style than Tom, who sat beside me, and definitely more grime. Always a stranger to soap, that one. Tom shouted, "That bloke's dead, you know." "Really?" "Yeah, really, he's dead." Stones looked at him and laughed out loud. "Go figure." "You want a pint, Tom?" he shouted. "I'm broke," said my biker colleague. "I don't think it fucking matters anymore." Stones pointed up at the sky. "Yeah, okay, then get me a pint." Tom turned back to me. "What's the dead dude after then?" "Forgiveness," I said. "Really? Why?" "He was a bully, a nasty little bully," I said to Tom. "He just hurt people because he enjoyed doing it. He's been dead for a few years now and just too scared to stop being a ghost." "So he's scared of the day of judgment or something like that?" "That's what he says. Reckons that if I just forgive him, then he'll be all right." "Then I'm fucked then, aren't I?" "Shouldn't think so, Tom. I don't think you've ever thumped anyone who didn't deserve it, and you've always been good to your mum and Carol. I reckon I should have thumped him years ago." "Would that have saved his sorry ass?" "I don't think so. He's got too many cruelties to forgive. That's a lot of injuries. They all add up to evil in the end, no matter how the little bastard tries to justify himself." In the meantime, said little bastard was now attempting to persuade someone else to come and threaten me. Tom shouted across, "Bubba, hit him!" "Really?" shouted Bubba. His massive belly started at his sternum and would probably have ended up by his knees if he wasn't wearing a belt. "Yeah, really, it's just an experiment." Before little bastard could even think about moving away in fear, her fist had gone flying towards him and straight through him. "Fuck!" Bubba shouted and did a little dance of unexpected delight. "Did he see that?" Other people came out the pub now, and then a few more started throwing punches at him. All went through. No one was scared. Instead, it was turning up into a bit of a joke. Tom got up. "Do you mind?" He pointed at one of the two sandwiches left. "Ta, listen, a few of us are going over to Mum's after. We're going to have an early Christmas, earlier than the bloody shops even. We got everything in the house, including the sherry and a trifle, and I know Mum and Carol would love to see you. Hey, even bring your nasty little fat friend over there with you. It'll drive him mad to watch us eat the turkey he can't even touch." "Interesting that," said Tom. "Dead and with a conscience, or is it dead and consumed by guilt? Which do you reckon it is?" "More the latter," I said. "He was never invested with a conscience. He's just terrified." "Terrified? Why? But he's already dead." Well, I said, not properly dead. He's been hiding in a waiting room somewhere for the last 8 years, too terrified to go through and be judged. Plenty of them in there, I'd guessed. "Purgatory?" Tom asked. Like I said earlier, we'd both gone to Sunday school together. Bloody hell, that bastard thing in the sky is going to destroy even purgatory. He looked up. "That is some kind of fucked up physics for you. It's definitely bigger. Hopefully it'll be quick. I don't want to think of Mum and Carol suffering anymore." He looked up again. "Why are they calling it a black hole if it's red?" he said, "and expanding?" "Listen," I said, if it was a black hole, we'd already be gone, solar system and all." "Stones was saying that," said Tom. That made us both laugh. Stones wasn't the smartest guy we knew, but give him a bike engine and he was a genius. Anything else puzzled him cross-eyed. "Anyway," Tom carried on, "our resident genius reckon it's a window and there are aliens on the other side just as terrified as we are. Over the years, Stones has read every science fiction novel going and he reckons it's a tear of some sort. Still bad enough. Fuck it. Gotta go," he said. "My free beer's getting warm in there and I got a banquet to prepare. Time for the sandwiches and I'll see you later. You make sure you're there." I gave him the thumbs up. He trotted over to the other side of the road and threw a punch at the fat one. "Fuck," he shouted and turned to me and laughed. "That's bloody weird." He raised his hand and dipped into the pub. I looked up and down the street before getting on and was not really surprised to see quite a few dead people being collectively miserable in each other's company. It was strange when he looked at them and knew them retrospectively. Many of them had been the most respectable of people in the community when they were alive, but clearly they were so scared of something they'd done that they'd been content to stay on in the waiting room of destiny rather than trip over the light and have their lives judged. Tom was obviously right about purgatory. It seems that even death has its own curious physics. Anyway, that's just my surmise about what was happening to them. But they certainly looked scared. They'd have more information on this than I did, so I took their concern to be appropriate. They were worth watching though, and from the outside, to me at least, it looked like most of them came from different tranches of a very mixed society. I'd say I knew a quarter of them. The rest must have died when I was a kid or before that even. There was something that they had in common other than obvious fear. It had to be a set of values around which they gathered in easy self-justification. Collectively, they might believe or persuade themselves to be the righteous who'd done their best for the benefit of others. If enough people support your lies, then they become truths, for you anyway. But that fades when the real truth keeps smacking you around the back of the head. But individually, that was another matter entirely. It was clear that they were all too scared to be left alone with the company of their consciences. I could compare them to the abandon of the bikers in and out the pub, and the locals. There seemed to be an understanding in there. Whatever moments of silence that had been creeping in earlier had been discarded by conscious effort and noisy society. At home or in their churches, the uber-religious would have been on their knees for quite a while by now, and wailing joyfully in anticipation of the great rapture. I remember telling Tom when we were 16 that the Great Rapture was all to do with the Book of Revelations or something, and had bugger all to do with the joy of sex. Was that guilty bunch down there busy coming up with theories that might save them, I wondered? Persuading themselves of new untruths, none of it mattered because they had lost the haven of cowardice in which they hoped to spend the rest of eternity hiding in and maybe hoping for a policy change somewhere down the line. No matter how hard you tried to persuade yourself to the contrary, we were definitely heading for a termination of all things. The sun might well come up the day after, but none of us would ever see it. I suppose that many of the elderly in the homes that had borne the noisy greetings of the bikers on their wrinkly runs, they must be feeling more optimistic than the rest of us. Glad even. For one thing, they no longer needed to wait to fade away in the hope of one day meeting their loved ones already gone ahead. I hope it's true for them and for me. I'm not elderly, but I think I was closer to them in the hope of what was going to happen. It was way too late to complete things that should have been either begun or completed ages ago, but things unsaid could still be said. But sadly, no punches could be thrown at the partially dead or whatever they were. All we could do was demonstrate our continued contempt for them. The little fat bastard had scuttled down the pavements towards the other dead, still dodging ridicule and the odd punch. I wondered how many had actually received redemption by forgiveness. I suppose it depended on how long they'd been hiding. Would the people they wanted to apologise to still be around? Hopefully they'd passed right by purgatory eagerly and not even noticed the crowd cowering behind the window shutters in the waiting room. He was still eyeing me. It was like I could see his mind work on how he could persuade me to do something I had no intention of doing, namely accepting his apology. He'd already seen me give it to one purgatory person. Hopefully it was driving him crazy. Surely there were others he could apologise to, and maybe there was a 50% threshold that he could use to get over the line. Wherever he'd been during his life, he had caused damage, lots of damage, and he was now using the same mindset that caused that damage to try and dig his way out. It's not my nature to torment people, and I wasn't doing that when I turned my eyes from him and onto the large red eye in the sky. I wondered what was in there. If there were terrified aliens in there like Stones thought, hopefully having a grand old party. If there was any happiness even thinking about the subject. Most people live their lives intent on avoiding reality as long as possible. But at last, here it was, ready to bite their bums. It's not that them again, weren't telling us enough about this entity. If an emptiness between spaces could be called an entity, they weren't telling us anything. Probably far too scary to even define. I didn't have a clue what the general message to the nation was. I snorted. What we really needed now was a kind of Morgan Freeman speaks to the world moment, really. There was chaos and disorder everywhere. There was a large community. And I was wondering if other small communities like ours were containing themselves. Maybe the panic was at a level relative to the unrealised ambitions of people. I wish I'd been a bootlegger. I'd have made a fortune. But to what purpose? Nah, I was going to stay relatively sober. Relatively. My dad had dealt with his final illness with both courage and dignity. That would do for me. Plus a few glasses of whiskey, like he'd have insisted. And what was it Khalil Gibran had written? Do not the spirits of the ethers envy man his agonies, or something like that. I wondered if I could sneak in a bottle of whiskey for my dad. I thought about the policy change the nasty dead had been hoping for. Maybe this was it. Go out and seek forgiveness from those you'd injured. I'm not sure who was being tested there. They're those doing the apologising or those asked to do the forgiving. Whatever it was a sneaky way for the afterlife to deal with the problem by issuing unsent emails from the injured and damaged. I like it. Very political, that, dumping the responsibility on others. I was as content as I could be, I suppose. I was going to a party with some of my best friends, and the only concern I had for tomorrow was that I hoped it was going to be quick. Other than that, it was all out of my control. So I got up. I was going to go to the cemetery to make sure my parents' gravestone was clean and tidy. I'd pop into the supermarkets along the way to look for some pretty flowers. Maybe they'd be sold at 100% discount because I had no money on me. And then I'd ask Mum to put the kettle on for me tomorrow and ask Dad to get ready to catch me. It was a good plan. Yeah. I'd put some pretty flowers in their pots. There was nothing else to worry about. Too late for dreams now. I don't think I'd avoided them from lack of courage, but from lack of resources and evil bastards being in my way when I cared for others. It was all going to be a nice evening. A bit too much red, possibly. Too late to complain about anything. And so far, no zombie apocalypse to worry about. Not with the pathetic, guilty-ridden ghosts we had around here. Well, purgatory might be full. Hell probably wasn't. I might even forgive a few on the way to Asda just to spite the others. I'd probably get judged for that, but for my defence, I reckon I was only meeting the new policy halfway. That's it. I'll leave you there. Good luck to the rest of you. I hope you all find your loved ones waiting for you, the kettle on and your mum's victorious sponge cake on a china plate ready for you, and maybe Radio Luxembourg murmuring in the background. Bye.